What are the most profitable franchises to own, and which franchises can you make your money back the fastest? So Upflip.com looked at a bunch of different franchises to try to figure out which franchises would allow you to make your initial investment back the fastest. Here are the top 10.
All right, I'm very interested. What is the list? Most of you are probably curious too. What is the list of the top 10 franchises that you can make your money back the fastest? Fascinating. It's so interesting to me how you can watch any short on the internet and just take it as the gospel and the truth. Because I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Franchise Empire, I'm like, number one, I'm curious to what the list is. How did they come up with the list? How did they get the data for it? And is it accurate? And is it true? So let's dive into that. I want to fact check this. I want to know, number one, what are the top 10, as well as, is it actually true? Are these the franchises that you can make your money back the fastest? Well, let's see.
Number 10 is SnapOn Tools.
SnapOn Tools. All right, so I was able to find SnapOn Fitness's franchise disclosure document. If you're not familiar, this is where you can see the public records of the franchise system, and if they show how much franchise owners are making, they have to show it in this document. So the first thing we want to go to, because he's talking about being able to make your money back the quickest. So the first thing you need to know is how much does it cost to start up and how much are owners making, right? And this is something that I call sales to investment ratio. It's a formula that we actually coach our clients on of you want to have a certain sales to investment ratio. Typically, if it's a retail location, 2-to-1, if it's service, 3-to-1. Meaning, if the startup cost on average, it's between $221,000 to $500,000. So that means that on average, $720,000. So let's just call that $350,000 on average. So SnapOn Tools, I think these are trucks. So basically the average sales should be somewhere between 2 times the startup cost of $700,000 to 3 times, which would be a little bit over $1 million. All right, so let's look at their item 19, which is where they can make financial performance representations and say how much money they make. Okay, so in here, this is for sales for 2024, US and Puerto Rico. These are for all reporting franchises. So let's take a look. It says, let's start with the bottom third. It says that the bottom third of franchisees, the average sales are $500,000 for the bottom third. The average sales for the middle 1/3, $774,000, and the average sales of the top 1/3 is $1.1 million. The highest paid sales being $2.7 million. So from a sales to investment ratio, the middle third, they're at about a 2-to-1, and the top third are about a 3-to-1. So, okay, is this actually the franchise that you can get your money back the quickest? Well, they don't report sales like profitability, right? And some of you may go, well, sales don't matter. Profit is the only thing that matters. I disagree and I agree at the same time. It's almost impossible to measure the profitability of every franchise because every franchisee does their profit and loss statements different, meaning they write off different things, they put different expenses in there. The franchisor can't control how they show their expenses. What profitability on a P&L, profit and loss statement, also doesn't show is if the owner's paying themselves a salary. So let's say it shows that the business is making $100,000 in profit on the profit and loss statement, but the owner also pays themselves a $100,000 salary. That is hidden basically in the payroll cost. Well, the owner's making $200,000, but it only shows the business is profiting $100,000. Hey, so if you want to learn the right way to own a money-making franchise without putting your family at risk financially, then check out our free masterclass at franchiseempire.com/masterclass. Let's get back to the episode. But here's the most important thing to consider with this specific franchise. Okay, if they do that amount in sales, what is their gross profit margin on the tools? So as an example, let's say you sell tools, you sell it for $1,000, but you paid $700 for the tools. Then your gross profit margin is $300 on the tools. And then you have all of your expenses for the business. So this could be really deceptive where seeing 1.1 million in average sales, if the cost of goods are really high, then the profitability could be crap on this. That's what we don't know, but at least we're able to see what the sales are and where they're at from a sales to investment ratio. Let's take a look at number 9.
9 is Perek. Number
Perek, they're totally putting the wrong, whoever edited this, they put the wrong franchise here. That's not even a franchise. Pertech. That's not even a thing, ladies and gentlemen. This is Perek. Which is funny. Like, people just make these generic videos that they don't even look into making sure that it's accurate. At the end of the day, it could have just been an editor mistake, right? So not a big deal. Our editors have made mistakes before too. But let's look into Perek. Perek is an interesting business. You may be wondering, what is Perek? What do they do, right? Perek has a very, very interesting business model, right? So they do hydraulic hoses. So if you thought about the most sexy franchise in the world, they do hydraulic hoses, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, there's a franchise that does hydraulic hoses. So now the question is, well, how much does it cost to get them open? How much does it make? Well, this ranges from $235,000 to $666,000, which includes $130 to $300 that must be paid to the franchisor or affiliate outlet. So if we wanted to look, we could look at what's called the item 7, and the item 7 brings us to, it'll show us the whole list of the startup cost. So it shows us the range of $235,000 to $666,000 and the breakdown of all of that. So, but here's the question, is this actually one of the most profitable franchises? Well, we know that SnapOn, that's not accurate to label it as one of the most profitable franchises because we don't know how much profit they make. We do know what the sales to investment ratio is though. So we are clear on the specifics of that. All right, so for Perek, let's take a look. So it ranged from about $200,000 and change to $666,000. So let's call that about $900,000 divided by 2 to get the kind of median number there is about $450,000 on average. And we look at the sales. In 2024 year, all franchisees, all franchise centers, what that means is that one franchisee can own multiple centers, right? Think of a center as a location if you're doing something like food, right? So there's 138 centers. The average center does just over $1 million in sales, okay? So that's about a little bit over a 2-to-1 sales to investment ratio on the average. And then they go into tier 1 centers, tier 2 centers. We're not going to really go into all of that. But what they do show is they show the sales based on how many years that the business was open, which is interesting. And this is why I always tell people, everyone always wants to be an overnight success. Where they go, I want to open a business in my first year, I want to be able to replace my income. Like, okay, great. You've been in the corporate world for 10, 15, 20 years. How long did it take you to get to the amount of income you're making now? It took you 10 years. It took you 15 years. You didn't start out making 150 grand your first year in corporate. Most people, maybe you started out at 40 grand, maybe at 50 grand. It's to say, I want to start a business in my first year. I want to produce. I want to replace my income is the stupidest thing I've ever heard because it is the most short-term thinking, which is represented here. So the number of full calendar years that the business has been open, 1 to 2 years, the average gross sales $589,000. If 3 to 4 years, average sales $738,000. 5+ years, the average sales $1.3 million. So ladies and gentlemen, what does that tell us? That tells us that if we are open for 5 years or more, we are going, on average, to be producing more than $1 million in sales. Now, does this make this the most profitable franchise business with a 2-to-1 sales to investment ratio? I would say probably not, unless this business has really, really high profitability margins, which it could be the case. Clearly, we don't have that information there. What we can see is that the highest franchisee is doing $3.4 million in sales. The lowest performing franchisee does $52,000 in sales. And we can see that the highest franchisee in the group that's been open 1 to 2 years, this is actually not per franchisee, this is per center. So you could have a franchisee that owns 2 centers, but they did 1.75 million as the highest, which is pretty cool because that's even higher than the high of the people that have been in the 3 to 4 year range, which is very interesting. But 2-to-1 sales to investment ratio, is it the most profitable? I don't know. Is it a good opportunity? Possibly. Now, before we get on to number 8, you may be thinking, well, I'm interested. What are some of the franchises that make the most amount of money, that show the highest amount of sales and some of the best sales to investment ratios? Well, here's the good news is that I put together a list of what I call 5 low-cost franchises that all make over $1 million or more. So it has a very low startup cost, but it shows that owners are making over $1 million in that franchise. So I have a 17-page PDF that we created along with the video breakdown. If you want to get that list of franchises for free and get the breakdown, you can go to franchiseempire.com/low cost. The link will be down below in the description and in the comments. Go ahead and grab that for free as a thank you for watching this video.
Number 8 is McDonald's.
I was shocked to see that McDonald's was number 8. Okay, why was I surprised to see McDonald's listed at number 8? And some of you may think it's obvious. Well, McDonald's is everywhere. You got to make a ton of money if you own a McDonald's franchise, right? Maybe, maybe not. Generally speaking, food franchises are the lowest profit margin franchises that you could get involved in. Let me repeat that. Generally speaking, food is the lowest profit margin business that you could get involved in. Anyone that's been in the food business knows this. Food generally has profit margins between 5 to 15%. I'm just talking in general. I'm not talking specific to franchises, right? I used to own food franchises, juice and smoothie franchises, and generally speaking, my profit margins were not higher than 12 to 15%. So why would McDonald's be one of the most profitable? That just doesn't make sense to me. The startup costs range from $1.4 to $2.7 million, ladies and gentlemen. 1.4 to 2.7. So extremely high startup costs. So what do the sales numbers look like? Okay, so I pulled up McDonald's FDD, looking at where they report their sales. Theirs shows a little bit more complicated than others, but here's the line that we want to pay attention to. The average annual sales volumes of domestic, meaning US-based, traditional McDonald's restaurants. Traditional meaning it's not like in an airport, it's not in a mall, it's not like in a kiosk. It's just a traditional McDonald's location that you would see. So the average traditional McDonald's open at least 1 year. The average sales was $4 million. That is less than a 2-to-1 sales to investment ratio. Because if we go back and look at their startup cost, if we go all the way back to the front page, 1.4 to 2.7 million dollars. That averages to about a little bit over $4 million divided by 2. So in the middle is about 2 million. So okay, it's about a 2-to-1 sales to investment ratio. So, but with what we know about the food business, I would argue to say that this is probably not one of the most profitable businesses, because as an example, and I'm not saying that McDonald's does this level of profit, but if you were doing this is easy math, right? If you're doing 10% profit on $4 million, that's $400,000 a year in profit. One thing that you guys have to factor in is that most people are not paying cash to get that open, right? They're getting a loan. I believe what I have read is that McDonald's requires that you put at least 50% down for the cost of your locations. Don't fact check me on that because I'm not 100% sure. But at $400,000 in profit, even if you were producing that, your cost of your loan for a $1.5 or $1 million SBA loan is pretty significant. You're talking about it's going to be over somewhere between $10,000 and $15,000 a month. So this being a business that you would recoup your investment back very quickly, I would say this is false.
Number 7 is Matco Tools.
Matco Tools. Interesting. Let's take a look. Okay, so the average Matco Tools, this is another tool distribution company, $108,000 to $382,000 to get up and open. So that puts us at, let's just call that at 108 plus 382 is about $500,000, just as a rough estimate. So the median cost in the middle would be about $250,000 to get open. So let's see in the item 19. What sort of numbers are they producing? So here we are. Middle third, $489,000. Top third, $766,000. Bottom third, $302,000. So the sales to investment ratio here would be close to 2-to-1 when using the average numbers, close to 3-to-1 when using the average numbers. Pretty similar to SnapOn, actually, and similar business models. So that is all reporting distributorships, and that's chart 1. What is chart? Okay, and this is just showing the highest sale. So, I mean, and just looking at the averages, I would say this also probably is a false, especially not knowing what is the cost of goods for the margins of this business.
Number 6 is the UPS store. And ironically, you can actually open a UPS store for pretty cheap. Number 5.
Can you? Let's find out. Okay, so the investment to open a new or relocation traditional UPS center under the laser light design, not sure what that means, is between $240,000 and $476,000 to get open. They put all sorts of other stuff in here, but that's the traditional unit. So whether that's not a lot to get open, I guess it's all relative. If you're comparing it to a McDonald's, that's not the case. Again, in the 5 low cost franchise PDF breakdown, we see franchises $250,000 and less to get those bad boys up and running. So I would consider those more so low cost. But if we add up $247,000 to $476,000, that would put us somewhere over $700,000. So an average cost of between $300,000 and $350,000 to get up and open. Okay, so quick disclosure here on the UPS store when looking at their sales that they report. This is from their 2023 franchise disclosure document, so it's a little bit outdated. I was not able to pull their latest franchise disclosure document, but what we can see is that in the stores performing 2022, the average sales right here, right? The average sales listed 709,000 for all centers. The average for the top 10 centers, 1.2 million, average for bottom 10%, 358,000, and the highest location doing 2.9 million. So if we take the average, it's still, again, about a 2-to-1 sales to investment ratio, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm still not seeing with just 2-to-1 sales to investment ratios how we're coming up with that these are the most profitable franchises, especially generally franchises that are only averaging that level of sales, and you have to be in a class A retail center, meaning your good shopping centers is usually where the UPS stores are, right? Where the grocery stores are, that's considered class A commercial real estate. Well, they're paying a lot in rent. I mean, typically, you're going to pay, I don't know, between $25 to $50 a square foot in rent. So I think that's hard to be considered one of the most profitable. So we'll call this false.
5, at no surprise, is Ace Hardware.
At no surprise. I'm just curious by that comment. 5 at no surprise is Ace Hardware. Why is that no surprise? Would you consider Ace Hardware to just randomly be one of the most profitable franchises? I'm so surprised by that comment. Granted, I love Ace Hardware. I actually started a career the first 4 years. All throughout high school, I worked at an Ace Hardware. And it was just a blast. I mixed paint. I loaded people's cars with like mulch and manure. I did rental equipment, cut keys, all sorts of cool stuff. But Ace Hardware actually is not a franchise. Ace Hardware is a co-op, which is something that I actually recently learned because I thought that they were a franchise. The difference in a co-op is that basically, the stores and locations are individually owned and operated, but the owners actually hold shares in the entire cooperative of the system. So essentially, they're shareholders in the whole shebang. So they are not a franchise, so there's nothing here to be able to fact check and report. But again, a business where you have a ton of labor, meaning a ton of employees for an Ace Hardware, and you have a physical location where you're probably paying a lot in rent, either in a land lease, which is just you're leasing the ground in the shopping center, and then you're paying to actually build the Ace Hardware, or the landlord's paying for it. Either way, you're going to pay a lot in rent on a monthly basis, which probably eliminates you from being able to be one of the most profitable.
4, at definitely no surprise, is a ChickfilA.
We're going to just scratch this off because ChickfilA, you don't actually own anything, ladies and gentlemen. You are considered an operator. You get to share in a percentage of the profits with ChickfilA. ChickfilA puts up all of the cost to be able to build the building. It's harder to own a Chick-fil-A than it is to get into Harvard, according to the percentages and the applicants, that the percentage of people who get approved to operate a Chick-fil-A based on the amount of applicants. So we can just label this as false because you don't actually own anything. You can't sell it. You can't pass it down to your family. So unless you want to basically buy yourself a job, which some people may, because Chick-fil-A operators do get paid bank. What I have heard or seen on average is that they're making around $300,000 on average. Again, I don't know if that is the verified number, but I think the highest Chick-fil-A does like $17 million in sales. The average one does somewhere around $8 million in sales is what I have seen on some of the numbers. But again, you don't own anything. So next.
Number 3, which does surprise me, is a Wendys.
Guys, based on the numbers that we pulled from McDonald's, I can already pretty much tell you that this is going to be false. But just for shits and giggles, let's take a look. So when we look, it ranges from $1.5 to $3 million to get a Wendys up and open. And I doubt that's around similar cost to McDonald's. And I doubt that they are making on average what a McDonald's makes. I don't think that Wendys outperform McDonald's. Yeah, when we look, the average annual sales, $2.3 million. So they do not perform. And that's like closer to a 1-to-1 sales to investment ratio. That's company restaurants. So for franchise restaurants, they do a little bit less on average, 2.1 million. So this is false. This is completely false.
Number 2 is a business I would never touch, is ReMax.
Why does he say that this is a business he would never touch? What's the context to that? I don't know why. I mean, ReMax is in the real estate space. I don't know anything about if ReMax is actually a good franchise. Now I'm going to look into it, but it's just an interesting comment to make. All right, ReMax, the franchise business ranges from $45,000 to $245,000. So this is probably the lowest cost one that we've looked at so far. So interesting. Granted, the real estate market is super competitive and people generally are not going to buy a ReMax franchise if you do not have experience in real estate, right? So I think this is one of the one that's unique where unless you're a real estate broker or a real estate agent, you're probably not buying a ReMax franchise. And guess what, ladies and gentlemen? They opt to not make any representations about a franchisee's future financial performance or past financial performance. So they don't even disclose. They opt to say, guys, we're not showing our cards. We're keeping our cards close to our chest. In my experience, that is not representative of a franchise that's crushing it. Because when you're in the business of recruiting people to be an owner and invest in your business, wouldn't you want to show your returns, your financial returns? So maybe that's why he said that he would stay away from it. Maybe he knows something that I don't know about the performance of ReMax franchises.
And then number 1 is Express Employment Professionals.
Express Employment Professionals. Very, very interesting. This is actually a brand that is in our portfolio and inventory at Franchise Empire, where we have helped introduce some of our clients to them if their markets and territories are available. Curious to see what the numbers look like there. Now, if you aren't familiar, Express Employment Professionals is a recruiting. It's a staffing business. Essentially, they're providing temporary staffing, contract staffing for employers. The average franchise business, $91,000 to $213,000 in startup. And if you provide core occupation services, I'm not sure what that is, $191,000 to $391,000. And if you provide professional occupation services, $313,000 to $500,000. I would imagine that you would probably want to provide as many services as possible. So we are going to use the high number as the baseline. All right, so Express has one, we saved the best for last. They have one of the most complicated and detailed financial reporting that they show. I'm going to save you guys a lot of headache, a lot of time, and having to look through it and interpret it on your own. I've done that myself. So here's what's interesting about this business. It says the average annual sales are $5.3 million in 2024 for units open more than 24 months. Here's the interesting thing is that the franchisees don't keep all of that revenue. They keep only a portion of the revenue because a large percentage of that $5.3 million is getting paid directly to the labor that they are placing into these companies. You can see that average annual gross margin that the franchisee gets to keep in general is about $1.1 million out of that $5.3 million. And so this is then the actual revenue that trickles down to the franchisee, and then the franchisee would have their cost of paying their staff that's on their team that works in their business, their office rent, their marketing costs, so on and so forth. So if we look at, okay, hey, this on average for the full level of services, about $400,000 to get up and open, this has about a 2.5 sales to investment ratio. So on the higher side of any of the ones that we have looked at. All right, so that was pretty interesting to walk through. So again, if you're looking for a bunch of opportunities that have lower costs, higher investments, go check out our 5 low-cost franchises that all make $1 million or more. And in this video here, I talk about 7 specific franchise businesses that make a load of money and have some mind-boggling sales numbers. So if you enjoyed this video, you got to check out that video. It's more straight to the point, just hitting on the startup costs and the earnings. Make sure to give this a thumbs up before you go, and I'll see you on the next one.